So moving on to the other Monday night football game, the Bills came out pretty flat against Kansas City. An offense that's pretty much been a powerhouse has been subdued these last 2 weeks. And you mentioned before that it'll really show once they get tested. Has Buffalo been overhyped this whole time? Do you think so?
I feel so.
I mean,
Oh,
last
go ahead.
night they had one drive that was a legitimate drive for a touchdown. It almost seems like it wasn't really what Buffalo was doing. It was Kansas City just kind of falling asleep. I think it was like their second drive of the third quarter there, or it might have been in the fourth. I can't remember. Whenever they scored their touchdown in the second half, it almost seemed like Kansas City was just kind of like, all right, we got this game in hand. And then Buffalo just drove down in a couple of minutes and scored. But aside from that, their other score came on, or their other touchdown came on a questionable defensive pass interference call. And aside from that, Buffalo's really hasn't been able to move the ball at all. Do you think this is showing how good Kansas City's defense is, or more worrisome for the Buffalo Bills not being able to produce like they have all
To
year?
me, it's more worrisome that the Buffalo Bills haven't been able to produce because if you look at the opponents they played, again, they played the Jets, who we all know what they are. The Dolphins at that time, they were still figuring things out with their defense. So, I mean, again, you could just say they're average. And then the Rams, who, again, like I said, they haven't beat anybody other than the freaking poor ass NFC East. So it's like, how good are they really? And then the Raiders. I mean, I guess you could say it's a convincing win. Maybe they caught the Raiders on the bad day. How possibly the Raiders caught the Chiefs on a bad day. There's no way to really know until the season completely folds out. But the Bills haven't really beat anybody, and obviously they got crushed by the Titans. And you could throw it up to, oh, they weren't prepared. Titans had 2 weeks. All that stuff everyone's throwing around.
Yeah.
But they got crushed. They got beat, thoroughly. And then same thing with the Chiefs. The score was close, but if you look at the score, or if you don't look at the score, the Chiefs completely dominated that game. And at no point did it ever look like Kansas City was ever in jeopardy of losing. And I felt like even if Bills got close, it almost seemed like the Kansas City Chiefs would just kick it up a notch and just do whatever they wanted. So Andy Reid knew that game going into that game that they weren't going to play their play style, which is typically more air raid offense. He knew the Bills defense
Hmm.
couldn't stop the run game, and he was okay with just methodically moving the ball down the field. And they almost had the ball twice as much as the Bills had the ball. And this, like I said, the score doesn't really reflect the dominance of the Chiefs that game. But in all honesty, their run game they just ran it down their throats and Bills couldn't do anything about it. And on the other end with Josh Allen, he looked like old Josh Allen for these past 2 weeks, throwing really bad passes, just inaccurate, and wasn't reading the field well, things like that. Obviously, the rain played a factor because it was raining kind of nonstop, and of course, for any
Hmm.
team that loves to throw the ball, that's going to affect it no matter what. But to
Right.
me, that was the first time they got tested. These last 2 weeks, they got tested by potential contenders, and they honestly folded. They did not look good at all on both sides of the ball. Like it wasn't like their defense was giving up a ton of points and their offense was still clicking. Their offense looked bad as well as their defense looked bad these last 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe you could chalk it up to them just having a bad game against Tennessee, all the scheduling stuff, blah blah. But they didn't look that much better against Kansas City, and Kansas City has a good offense, middle of the pack defense, so it's interesting. I don't know. I think that their cards, or I think that they were showing how good they really were these last 2 weeks. So we'll see how they play against the other, I guess, contenders because they have like Baltimore and stuff on their schedule.
Yeah. I mean, Buffalo came into the game looking to really, prevent any sort of big plays in the passing game. Just kind of odd considering the weather conditions. I don't know if Kansas City would have tried to test that many big plays, but Kansas City was perfectly fine picking up those chunk yards in the running game with Frenchie and just ripping Buffalo apart. And it almost seemed like Buffalo didn't adjust to that at all. They could not stop the run game. And even when they did make some stops, Pat Mahomes just did what Pat Mahomes does: break out of the pocket, find an open guy, and get it to him. Um, Also, Travis Kelsey looked weird as fuck without a beard. He's gonna have to grow that shit back because that shit ain't working. But it's weird, living here in Buffalo, you kind of see all the Buffalo fans post to social media. And a lot of them are blaming the coaching staff for this loss, and I don't see how this was on the coaching staff. Sure, they might not have made an adjustment, but I think even if they did make adjustments, Kansas City was going to be prepared for it.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this is on the coaching staff. I feel like a lot of it is on Josh Allen this game. He just couldn't hit anything. In terms of regards to the coaching staff, Stephon Diggs was a problem for the Kansas City Chiefs. Every time he had a one-on-one, he beat him. He forced the flag or whatever it was. And I feel like that second half, Stephon Diggs wasn't like targeted at all. And could that be because Josh Allen wasn't seeing him? Because a lot of times he was looking away from him and going through his progressions on the opposite side of the field. So I don't know how much of that was game plan. I don't know how much of that was Josh Allen not looking his way or not reading the field right. But if I'm going to put anything on the coaching staff, it would be that they didn't get Stephon Diggs involved at all in the second half, which obviously is their best player on offense. He's a mismatch nightmare, especially for those corners for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, again, in the middle of the pack, they're good, but they're not all that. And somebody Stephon Diggs could definitely exploit. And they had a lot of one-on-ones with him, and they didn't really throw his way. I don't know if that was game plan or what it was, but if I'm going to pinpoint anything the coaching staff didn't do, it would be they didn't get Stephon Diggs the ball in the second half. That could have possibly changed, the outcome. But that's the only thing I would say. But I don't know. Allen, to me, just didn't look good that game.
Yeah, it was definitely odd to see them not go to Diggs in the second half. I don't know if maybe Kansas City made an adjustment to change up the coverage against him. But, yeah, like you said, every time he was in man-to-man coverage, he either caught the ball or he drew a flag. And I remember the one time they had two receivers on the right, and I think Diggs might have fallen over, might have been pushed down, but Allen didn't even look his way and just threw it over to the left, and the ball got deflected. I just remember thinking if he threw it over to Diggs, probably would have drawn a flag because he was on the ground.
Yeah, for sure. That's the only thing I would say from a coaching standpoint. Again, it's kind of one of those things. It's like you don't know what the coaches are drawing up and scheming up. For the most part, the Bills' coaching staff has been pretty good at preparing their teams. Like these last 2 weeks, maybe they've just been struggling, or maybe it's the play on the field. The coaches aren't. I don't know. That's, again, something that, only people who know in the organization. They didn't look prepared these last 2 weeks, but maybe they just got outplayed by better teams. That could be it, too.
Yeah, it's just funny to see how much these fans will ride for Josh Allen, where they're willing to blame anybody else but him. Kind of like the Blaine Gabbert situation in Jacksonville, although Gabbert wasn't really anything special.
Yeah, that always happens with when you pick a franchise quarterback and you finally think you got your guy. You're going to try to make any excuse possible to, make him look like he is the guy and it's everybody else's fault when sometimes it's just the quarterback's fault. I look at it as a Jags fan with Gardner Minshew. He's dealt a really shitty hand. He has a really shitty team, shitty coaching staff, but he doesn't do himself any favors either. He's missing a lot of throws that he typically makes, and he just looks lost sometimes. And sometimes you have to chalk it up to, okay, maybe he's just not as good as we thought he was. Whatever coaching staff and stuff is in place, maybe he's just not that good. Maybe he's just reached his potential already. And it's hard to look at it that way because when it's a guy you want to root for, you want to try to find whatever excuse you can. Because when you see someone like Mahomes' situation who's thriving, he's put in a really good situation. He has a really good coaching staff. He has good weapons, good line, and a good scheme and all that. So it's like when so it's almost like you're jealous of it because it's like he has the perfect situation to succeed. When your guy doesn't, you're going to try to find all those excuses. But in reality, Pat Mahomes would do probably just as well with another coach and, other type of players. But it's just the perfect storm for what he has. Yeah. So it is interesting that that's just like a typical fan reaction. If you're a fan of that guy, you're going to try and find that excuse no matter what the hell happens and how bad or how good he is.
Yeah, it kind of brings it back to what we were talking about earlier about, regimes moving on from the first quarterback that they drafted. It's really hard to give up on a guy like that when, you brought him in to be your franchise.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for listening in to this clip of the Moose Bros podcast. If you enjoyed this, please comment below, and subscribe to this channel to see more clips just like this one. If you want to listen to the whole podcast, you can find us at Spotify or Apple Podcasts under Moose Bro Sports.